Hi, Dido speaks. Today, the story is about the highest level of entrepreneurship, resilience, and a massive turnaround. I'm talking about the brand Moncler. Moncler went public, that is, it went for an IPO in 2013. And guess what happened on the day of the IPO? The stock went up 47%. And that's what I love about companies that leave a lot of gain for the retail investors. Because look, I know I'm a banker and I see many companies that I worked with earlier, they do not leave much for the retail investor to gain from on the day of listing and subsequently. So this is a great thing. Now, I want to talk about Moncler and the CEO and the chairman, Remo Ruffini, before the day of the IPO. Moncler was always a brand very well known for its quilted jackets, but there was a time when it was not a fashionable brand really, but something changed in 1968. The French team that was going for the Winter Olympics, their skiing team wore Moncler jackets, and that was the beginning of it becoming a fashionable brand. Before that, workmen used to wear Moncler quilted jackets to save themselves from extreme cold. Now let's talk about Remo Ruffini. See, Remo Ruffini is an Italian guy, born and brought up in Como, Italy, and I hope you have gone to the city of Como. It's beautiful. Remo as a kid used to go for skiing. And in 1975, he convinced his mother to buy him a Moncler jacket. He loved it. Now, from there, they went to New York. Remo was the son of two fashion designers, to be very honest. His father launched his own brand called Nick, which became very, very popular in the disco era in the 1970s. Remo came back to Italy in the 1984 and he was big enough to actually launch his own brand. He launched a brand called New England, which did extremely well. He ended up selling New England to another Italian brand in 2000. He was a freshly minted massive millionaire. Now this was a time for Remo Ruffini to start looking for something new. By this time, because he had created a brand in the world of fashion and luxury, he was also a consultant for the holding company of, guess who? Moncler. Because he had a lot of cash on hand and he was looking for greater opportunities, he wanted to actually acquire a brand with a lot of history and good genetics. He had already worked on Moncler. In 2003, he acquired Moncler. By that time, Moncler was already going to ignominy. It was almost going bankrupt. Remo Ruffini knew what was needed and he had the exact brand right in front of him. He acquired the brand. By 2005, Ruffini wanted to really turn the brand around. He signed up partnerships with top designers, for example, Junior Watanabe. Now what happened was, with partnerships like those, Moncler started to get noticed. After the partnership with Junior Watanabe and the collection that he did for Moncler, Moncler got noticed in Japan. And remember, people in Japan, even in their 20s, the people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, they're highly fashionable. And they spend a lot of money on luxury. So if a brand gets success in Japan, that's a very good sign. If you go to Ginza in Tokyo ever, you will see this 8-story building called Dover Street Market. It's a high fashion and luxury hub for many brands. This is a store owned by Comme des Garçons, which is a global behemoth in luxury and street style. So Dover Street Market actually noticed this collection by Moncler and they hosted Moncler in their store. And rest is history. You know, people in Japan became fans of Moncler. By 2011, Remo Ruffini had already, continued to expand the retail presence of the brand globally. In 2011, Remo wanted to do the IPO, that is, do the, initial public offering. But 2011 was also a very bad time given the sovereign crisis. What was this sovereign crisis? The PIGS economies, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece and Spain, all these economies are going through a major problem. Huge unemployment up to the tune of 15-20%. the governments were very close to defaulting on their bonds, and real estate was in a very bad shape in all these economies. So it was a very tough time, and which is why, Ruffini thought that perhaps he should step back and not really go for the IPO, which is what he did. And then finally in 2013, he did the IPO and, did really extremely well. But before the IPO in 2011, what he did was he sold 45% of the company's stake to Eurazeo for 418 million euros. Eurazeo is a big private equity player, and back then Remo Ruffini also wanted some cash. So Eurazeo came in, became a massive investor, and with that kind of money, Moncler continued to grow. And finally, the IPO happened in 2013. Look, when the IPO happens, some of the previous investors and the promoters get an opportunity to cash out to some extent. This was again a moment when Ruffini had some new cash with him and also in the company. So he wanted to go to the next level. He really wanted to make Moncler a massive, massive name. Remember, the IPO happened at $3.5 billion. Now, the story after the IPO, and this is where Ruffini's top quality leadership, entrepreneurship, resilience, etc. gets displayed again. In 2015, with the new cash and all the expansion on his mind and the redefinition of the brand, Ruffini hired Roberto Eggs from the LVMH group. Eggs had been an old executive, very, very experienced in building the retail presence for LVMH as a brand, as a group rather. Eggs came in as a chief operating officer, and later on he also donned the hat of chief marketing officer as well. What Eggs did was stupendous. He spent a lot of time and energy in building new systems and streamlining all the operations because they were looking at something massive. See, until this time, all these collaborations were already working, but Ruffini had already stumbled upon something very interesting. He was inspired by two brands specifically, RedBull and Nespresso. Do you know why? Because both these brands are built around building a community and the way they deliver their product. Nespresso, for example, it's not just retail stores, but these are experience stores. And similarly, RedBull has a massive community. Everything which is action and thrill is linked to RedBull. So, Ruffini was really inspired by these brands, and he wanted to do something similar with Moncler as well. What happens next is very, very interesting. Both Ruffini and Eggs decide to step away from a seasonal collection which happens in 3-4 months, 6 months, and go to a monthly capsule. This was the beginning and the genesis of a collection called the Genius Collection. The genius behind the Genius line. Ruffini decided on a rotating roster of many top-notch designers like Hiroshi Fujiwara, the streetwear god, and many other designers like Creed Green and Francesco Ragazzi of Palm Angels, etc., etc. And they started doing monthly collections with them. See, when you want to do monthly collections, you have to streamline a lot of things: your production, your logistics, your designing, your planning, etc., etc. And they always launched these collections with a lot of fanfare, a lot of euphoria. So they had to do events as well. They used to make sure that everything is figured out 6 months in advance, including all the contracts, etc. with the designers. That was the work that happened in the background behind this Genius Collection, and that was the genius. Now you would ask, okay, fine, yes, monthly collection, so what happened? This is what happened. When Pierpaolo Piccoli came up with his designs, which was more like a long gown of these quilted jackets, some of these pictures actually garnered the highest level of engagement ever in the history of Moncler. That was the impact. Now, see, the thing is, luxury is transforming. It is not only about Moncler, but when I look at many other groups like LVMH, like the classic groups like Armani Xenia or Montblanc and Hugo Boss, which is now Boss, all these brands are trying to attract the millennial population, the younger population, people in their 20s and 30s. Why? Because most of these people, they are the ones who are spending more money on luxury and experiences. They have the spending power, they have the will to spend, they have the will to experience. That's why all these brands are already working hard to move in this direction. Moncler had already figured out how to attract these people through the Genius collection. Now, I'll give you some statistics and see for yourself and decide for yourself how Genius has done for, with this kind of population. What Genius did was it started pulling a lot of people because it was outstanding. It was very, very different. And, it needed a lot of effort as well. So, the marketing budget had already gone from, let's say, $80 million to $120 million. That's huge. And only 10% of Moncler revenue comes from the Genius collection. But because Genius gets a lot of attraction and a lot of attention from people, what started happening was the Moncler sales from wholesale, that is them going to other stores versus sale happening in Moncler's own stores, started going up. That means Moncler was selling more products in their own stores, which definitely means higher margins, right? Now 10% of revenue coming from Genius, only 10%, but 40% of Moncler customers started to become the millennials. 40%. 50% of Genius customers are their first-time customers. That means they're attracting a lot of new people to the brand. See, the thing is, when you want to run business and you want to be highly profitable, there are two things. You obviously want to acquire new customers, but at the same time, you want to extend the relationship so that you can increase the customer lifetime value. Now, what is happening because of Genius is that they're attracting new people. As I said, right? 50% of people coming through Genius are new customers, right? And 40% of people actually coming to Genius ended up buying other Moncler brands as well. So you see, tremendous things are happening because of the Genius line. Many people were getting attracted to the brand and also converting and buying other products as well. And they continue to cater to their existing customer base as well. So the thing is, Moncler has become a massive conglomerate with the following things. They're highly flexible. They know how to attract people. They know how to engage them. Okay. And, they know how to extend the brand promise and their offering. Okay. Just to give an example, as of today, 45%, roughly 45% of revenues come from Asia Pac. And within Asia Pac, more than 30% of revenue comes from China. Now, how did that success story happen? See, the thing is, Ruffini is a master at building brands and connecting with your customers. Remember what I said about, getting inspired by Nespresso and Red Bull? They wanted to build the community, stay connected with the community, hear from them as to what they want and deliver the brand promise. So they were the first luxury brands to start using Instagram, Facebook or WeChat, so on and so forth, specific platforms for, different markets. They started using those, staying very, very closely connected to the millennials and other, the custodians of the brand and deliver products. This is what they did, which is why they are very, very big in China and they have done exceedingly well. That's what Remo Ruffini has been able to do. And I think from my point of view, Moncler Group, which is now a group because they have acquired Stone Island, which is also a very cool streetwear kind of brand, casual wear. They have acquired Stone Island and now it is Moncler Group. Where will they go from here? Look, they are a highly profitable company. They have done tremendously well for their investors. You remember the story about Eurasio, who acquired 45% stake in Moncler before the IPO? After 8 years of their acquisition of that stake, Eurasio exited at $1.4 billion. They made $1.4 billion. They invested 418 million euros and they came out with $1.4 billion. So they ended up making a lot of money. And that's primarily because of the leadership, the people who have worked behind the scenes at the brand and their genius, approach behind launching the collection Genius. Coming to the question, where do they go from here? Look, they will continue to do very, very well. And I think this is the time, when they will actually look to acquire certain other brands as well. Moncler has a certain approach. They made a luxury, high fashion brand out of something which was very, very basic, like a jacket, a quilted jacket used for skiing. But they made a high fashion brand out of it. So they really know how to do things. So they will go and acquire certain other troubled brands, or not even troubled brands, but they will look to kind of increase the brands under Moncler Group and continue to become bigger and perhaps be a competitor at some point in time to the LVMH group, the Kering group, etc., etc. So the thing is, this market is continuing to grow. There are new countries where new millionaires are being minted every year, like the China, like India, etc. And these brands, these groups will continue to target these markets along with the existing markets as well. So they will look to acquire a few more brands under the Moncler group stable. That was the story of Remo Ruffini and the transformation of Moncler, the genius transformation of Moncler, isn't it? Stay tuned on this channel to hear many more very interesting stories from the space of luxury. And because I find it really, really exciting. It's really cool. Behind what happens in the world of luxury, behind what happens in delivering that awesome product or service to you, which delights you. That's what luxury is all about, isn't it? Thank you for your time. Please press the bell icon and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.